Hey guys, this is Tombox, and today we're starting Rule Shark Prevention Season. Now, a quick announcement before we get started into this ruling video where I answer all of the ruling questions you guys had for the last couple of months, and new ones, and some upcoming ones, because I made some oopsies in a video, and I'm just going to address it here, alright? You guys made me admit my mistakes. But first things first, announcement on MSTmerch.com. Most of the staff, including myself, and including some of the other people, well, guess what? They flew over to YCS Orlando, and they came back, well, very sick. You know, most people got sick. Lots of players got sick. If you guys are not feeling well, get yourself checked, because I think the flu was going around that event. And so get yourself checked, all right? My wife got sick. I'm somehow not sick, so I'm invincible. This particular season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is especially easy to get caught up in some kind of rule sharking scenario. Ryzeal cross applying its effect during resolution. There is the Maliss monster that can't get negated by any means as long as she's pointing to something. And then there's even like Mitsurugi. There's so many Mitsurugi cards that can be addressed in this video, from Ame's effect to even Mitsurugi ritual itself versus a common card like Ash. There's so much complexity even within that situation alone. Now, on top of that, we'll even go for some future cards like Lode, like Primite Lode, because I talked about that in the Blue Eyes, and also Destined Rivals, because that's just me wanting to correct a little oopsie in a previous video. So we'll talk about all that in this one video. So it applies to, you know, the past, present, and future. Don't want you guys to get screwed over. I'll even teach you guys little tips so that you guys can properly communicate, so you won't get stuck in those scenarios, or at least if someone's gonna get the penalty, it's gonna be your opponent not playing properly and not being you miscommunicating. All right, so with that being said, hit the like button, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, even if it just helps you out a little bit and makes the game a lot more pleasant for you. All right, let's go. All right, question number one, Artifact Lancea versus Allure of Darkness. This is a classic that I could have answered like last month, but I didn't, so this is the one I'm starting with just to set the record straight. It will get a lot more complicated, don't worry, but we're just going to answer this as is. So what happens when you activate Artifact Lancea to, you know, Allure of Darkness? You're chaining the card. The answer's simple. Your opponent gets a Pot of Greed now. Allure of Darkness is now Pot of Greed as long as they can reveal a dark monster in their hand. They get to draw 2 cards, reveal the dark monster, so they don't have to lose their hand. If they can't reveal the dark monster, throw their whole hand into the graveyard. Okay, that part's fine. And typically, a regular player would not throw an Artifact Lancea against their Allure of Darkness. However, in the current format with Maliss, and typically it's just Maliss playing the Allure of Darkness, yeah, you would still throw the Artifact Lancea and give them that Pot of Greed. I forgot it, and I missed the timing. I would still just throw the Artifact Lancea even to that card. The reason being is that I don't want them to banish any of the Maliss pawn monsters, the cat, the rabbit, the rat. I don't want them to throw any of those cards to banish because they get a free summon, and stopping the summon is more important. I don't want them to have combo pieces. Okay, there. That's my 2 cents there. But now, going to the follow-up question, what happens when you activate Allure of Darkness after Artifact Lancea? The answer is, you can't, and anyone that says you can is pretty much just cheating after they saw this video. They're just so desperate to get that W, but they're relying on basically an illegal activation. Probably because they don't want to lose to your rogue deck after they spent, you know, thousands of dollars on QCRs, and they need that W to justify the spending. But yeah, they're being desperate, and they want to cheat so that they can justify the money spent. I don't know. They're just not playing properly. That's not a legal activation, because you can't activate Allure of Darkness after the fact of the resolution of Lancea, because cards can't get banished, and you can't resolve the entire effect of the Allure of Darkness. Simple. Ruling number 2, we have Maliss Q Hearts Crypter pointing to a monster. Will she be able to resolve if a skill drain is face up? The answer is yes. What if I chain infinite impermanence to her effect? Can she still resolve with the effect? Yes. So what if I preemptively negated her first with an infinite impermanence before she activated? The answer is yes. Yes. And also, that's kind of a stupid question. If you chained infinite impermanence to her effect, you would have applied your infinite impermanence anyways, and she already got the effect. So how is that really different from question number 2? Okay, it's kind of the same thing. It doesn't really make it that much of a difference, because your imperm still resolved before she got to her effect. Okay, the text is negated. However, what makes it so hard, okay, is why is she able to resolve? Because the part that has the bracket in there is parts of the mechanics of her effect, and in itself isn't an effect. It's kind of weird sounding. It's kind of like when you have those Altergeist cards that makes sure that, oh, even if your Altergeist monsters are negated, the effects are still going to go through. It's just that part of the effect is kind of like built into her card text, making her almost impossible to negate as long as she's pointing to a monster. Okay, so that's why she's pretty busted, and she gets to bypass a lot of stuff, and that is something that's newly set within her own effect, the bracket. It kind of reminds me of like Cosmic Blazar Dragon. How even if Cosmic Blazar Dragon is negated, it will still place itself back onto the field because it's just part of the cost. So this is just part of the mechanics of her effect, and that's the easiest way to kind of learn about her effect. And if in the future we get effects where there's stuff in brackets saying that it can't be negated, then this is the precedent that we're going to be working with. Now we have Mitsurugi Ritual versus Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Common question: can I use Ash Blossom to negate Mitsurugi Ritual? The answer is, it depends. Which effect are we using here? Okay, so where am I summoning from? If I'm summoning from the hand and I'm tributing the materials from the hand, deck, and graveyard, the answer is no. I'm only summoning from the hand. And what about summoning from the deck? Then if you read the card of Ash, then you would say, yes, I can negate the summon from deck. And the tributing part, that's not exactly a cost. That's just part of how ritual summons are done. It's sent to the graveyard by effect. Because it's not actually a cost, it's just tributing for material. I don't want to explain this here because it's going to take too long, but why can't I use it for the summon from hand where, you know, cards are being tributed from the deck? You know, isn't that cards being tributed from the deck essentially cards being sent to the graveyard from the deck? And the answer is no, because tributing cards and destroying cards are, another mechanic which does not designate the final location of a card. Sure, by default they would be going to the graveyard, but it doesn't necessarily have to do so. Alright? And that's just how tributing works. That's just how destruction works. Another card that you can compare this to is Sacred Fire King Garunix. Can you Ash Blossom that card when it attempts to destroy a fire monster from the deck? The answer is no, you can't. And tributing and destruction are kind of in a similar category of mechanics where it does something which would result in stuff going to the graveyard but doesn't necessarily have to go there. Alright, that's my cheap explanation that you guys can think about it, but it's a very specific keyword that we use in this game. Next we have Ame no Murakumo no Mitsurugi versus the Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion. I guess the question is, can my opponent use Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion versus my Ame no Murakumo's Tribute Trigger effect? The one where, if it gets tributed in the new chain, it's going to activate and then summon itself, and also, well, before that, you would even have to add a card from your deck to your hand. And the answer is yes. Yes, you can hit it. As long as it is in the graveyard, then yes, you can hit it with a Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion, preventing the add and preventing the summon altogether, negating that whole activation. Okay. Your follow-up is, well, can they use Ghost Belle on it if I tribute it from the hand? Good question. If you tribute it from the hand, typically that means you're playing Mitsurugi Prayers. And so in the new chain, the answer is yes. Yes, you can, because it still includes the card text of it would summon itself. It's part of the same line, and it doesn't go away. This is not something that's been determined during the activation. It's really hard to kind of give you guys a scenario because this is nothing really truly comparable. Yeah, something that you can also check with your head judge just in case. But to me right now, and based off of how it was ruled at YCS Orlando, yeah, you can still hit it with a Ghost Belle, which is why it hurts so much, no matter what you do with it. Which is kind of cool though. I still think it's kind of neat because it's still part of technically the card text. It's part of the same line of conjunction. Okay, it's there. Next, Destined Rivals. If you control a Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician, you can negate the effects of all face-up monster your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn. Now, if it didn't say currently controls, it would have applied like a crazy, like almost like a Harpy's Featherstorm-esque card, but it is not that. It is essentially a skill drain for whatever that is currently on the field. So that was my bad. I read it incorrectly. I read it without the currently controls when I did that Blue Eyes video. So yeah, well, if it didn't have the currently controls, I would be right, but in this case, I am wrong. You guys can be happy that, I addressed it. But, sometimes I misread cards too. I am dyslexic after all, and hey, some of you guys are requiring a dyslexic guy to read cards and deciphering how things would work for you. Well, let's not beat each other up over it. Only I get to do that. Next, we have Primite Lordly Lode. Okay, so we haven't gone to the Rule Shark part yet, but this is the last little bit here before we get into the Rule Sharking scenarios that you guys can help dodge. You can declare one normal monster's card name, special summon the normal monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard in defense position. Also, you cannot activate the effects of special summon monsters on the field this turn. Okay, so we cannot activate the effects of special summon monster this turn on the field. So why do people play this card? Like, so can I activate on-field monsters effect before I use Primite Lordly Lode's ignition-like effect? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. But doesn't it also say, like, oh, you can't activate the effects of special summon monster this turn? So why am I allowed to use this effect? This particular line of text, I think moving forward is likely going to continue. So rather than saying for the rest of the turn, it's just going to say this turn. But we're going to need to be able to distinguish whether or not it is a condition or whether or not it is part of the effect. And in this case, it is part of the effect. And it's worded the same way as SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight, on the summon trigger, it has one of those, your monsters cannot attack directly this turn. But yet we still do. We can attack directly, then we make an SP Little Knight, and we still banish a card from the field or graveyard. How does that work? It's because it is an applied effect and not a condition. So maybe moving forward, that's going to be the card text that they're going to use for anything that is just an effect. And usually if it's a condition, it would say like, during this turn, you cannot have activated blah, 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 blah effect. That would be the only thing that's wrapped up like as its own sentence. And that's how most of the time we use that to determine that as a condition. But this one's not the case. This one's also, your monsters cannot attack directly this turn. The also means that it's part of the effect. It has a conjunction of also bridging it together. So this is an effect, and I would say the same goes for Primite Lordly Lode. Also, you cannot activate the effects of special summon monster this turn. So use SP Little Knight as your example and as your precedent. So Ame no Murakumo no Mitsurugi. This ritual monster has that give your opponent an option type effect, where when your opponent activates a card or effect, quick effect, you can activate this effect. Your opponent can discard one card, okay, or that effect is negated. Okay, so in response to a card, you either give your opponent an effect where they discard a card, or it becomes negation. Now, this is the part where I wish people would just stop sharking, okay? Please stop sharking, because this effect, please do not misword it to your opponent. It does not add a cost to a prior chain link. But upon resolution, it sets up an effect that has a conditional effect and it's optional. So your opponent either chooses to discard a card or this card becomes a negation to the chain link below. That's what this actually is. But when people say that, oh, this is adds a cost to your chain link, then people feel like, oh, I have to immediately discard. And when they immediately discard, they actually risk taking a penalty right there. So stop your opponent from immediately or preemptively discarding cards. That's your responsibility, so that if this thing does occur, both players could receive a PE minor for not maintaining game state properly because you weren't clear on your communication. And I think that's also pretty vital too, because you have to make sure that both players are responsible for maintaining the game state. So do not immediately discard cards when your opponent activates this card. And two, it could result in you, the person who discarded the card, receiving a PE minor. And because you reveal the private knowledge card, and preemptively resolving a chain when the chain is not done. All they have to say is, oh, I'm not done chaining, I want to chain another card on top. Now you have a PE minor. Alright, that sucks. And if your opponent tries to do that against you, they're rule sharking you, and they're rule sharking you in the nastiest way possible, because you're losing on information and you're receiving a penalty. That sucks. That's a double whammy, okay? That really sucks. So the best thing to say, in my opinion, is to say, I have no response to your Ame activation if you're planning on letting it resolve. And then if they also don't do anything, then you can resolve it without any issue. And if they try to go back saying they're not done chaining, well, that's their own fault now, because they also said they have no response. So when both players have no response to a chain link, then the chain is done and moves forward, and it becomes now resolution of the chain. Then you can actually perform the actions for that particular activation. Whereas compared to, like, I've also seen the reverse of this as well, where someone says, oh, I have no response to your Ame, they take it as if you're not discarding a card, so they just immediately start resolving the chain link as if your card was negated, and then just like some broken game state comes up and you have to go and repair it. this is another thing. That's why you have to be very clear about having no response to the Ame activation, and not like I have no response to Ame, because the activation and resolution needs to be clear on this card, and this is where communication is key. And finally, Ryzeal Cross. This is the one that gives me the most amount of headache when people don't want to play this properly. Once per turn, when a monster effect activated by your opponent resolves, you can detach one material from an Xyz Ryzeal monster you control, and if you do, negate that effect. Now notice that the conjunctions here and the wording here is quite specific, where there are technically no activation whatsoever. There's no colon, there's no semicolon. It's just something that you do. It's a continuous like effect almost. It's basically unclassified, but essentially it's nothing that activates. It's something that you can just apply. But because it's something you can just apply, this is where the confusion comes in. There's two different ways that people are abusing this, and it's so silly. One is because of how people say on res. Okay, on res, activate Droll. You know, at the end of that previous chain, I'm going to activate Droll because you added the card to your hand. Makes sense, right? You say on res, activate Droll. That's very common. If you guys haven't heard it, you will. Then there's the Ryzeal Cross players. They say on res, detach a material. But the moment that they say on res, these sharks are going in for the kill here, trying to kill the entire chain link, because when they say, oh, you said on res, that means the chain link finished. So to be clear about this one, you say during resolution, I'll detach a material to negate your effect. You say during res. And or rather, instead of saying on res, activate Droll, you can say after resolving the last chain, I'm gonna activate Droll in the new chain. Like, you have to be a bit more wordy. Yeah, it's a little bit more of a word soup, but at least you give yourself a little bit of clarity. So what's the other way around? Some scuffed Ryzeal duelists use this as a way to end the chain link so they can win the chain link in their favor, which honestly kind of sucks. And also, some people say like, oh, I'm going to be activating this card. When they say they activate this card, some people chain like Ghost Ogre, and then they say like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to activate. It doesn't actually activate, but they've already said something that caused the opponent to reveal their hand. So you got to be very careful of your wording and your word choice when it comes to Ryzeal Cross. Okay, I don't want people saying the wrong things leading into this. And sometimes like, oh, I'm gonna use this effect. Okay, I'm gonna use the Ryzeal Cross and detach, and they preemptively do it immediately to your opponent's effect, and then they say, oh, I already detached. I mean, we are on resolution already, and therefore I'm ending the chain link short. Like, yeah, it's over. And like, but the easiest way to give your opponent a warning when it comes to them doing this, just say that you're not done chaining. That's all you have to say. Call judge, I'm not done chaining, and my opponent just jumped to resolution. Then the person who did the Ryzeal thing is the one that played him properly and kind of jumped the gun there. That's how you kind of protect yourself. In other words, communicate clearly, alright guys? Instead of saying on res, say during res for this card. That's all I have for this ruling video, everybody. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell. I'm hoping that it's going to help you guys out. And if you have a friend that's struggling on rulings or stuff like that, or if they're a bit new, send them my way. And this is probably going to help them kind of catch up to speed with the current format. That's all I have for this one. I am working on a 3-time structure deck of Blue Eyes White Dragon. It's somewhere on my table. It's right here. No, it's actually over here in the back. Yeah, this is the Blue Eyes structure deck. I'm going to do a triple build. And I might even play it out for locals. It'll be fun. Honestly, this deck is really, really strong, and it's going to be really easy to do. So if you guys stay tuned for that, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and I'll see you all in the next one.